We will turn the floor now to Professor Antonio Alejo. Welcome, Antonio. It's a pleasure having you with us. Professor Alejo collaborates with the research group Societies on the Move at the University of Coruña, and he's an associate researcher with the Instituto Galego de Análisis y Documentación Internacional. His topics of interest are global political sociology, diplomatic transformations, and human mobility. He has published extensively in very prestigious institutions such as CEDAW and Latin American policy. Welcome, Antonio, and the floor is yours. Let me just mention that after you give your remarks, I will open the floor to a long list of VIPs that they are all eager to jump into this conversation. So hopefully we will have time to wrap up this discussion, demanding a second round of all of you in this in another Zoom. So please, welcome.
Thank you. Do you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank to your MDT and CISAN, particularly Professor Núñez and Tilo, for this invitation. Today, I will focus in a very specific topic about deportation. But today, I will focus on the experience of the poor people with long-term ties in the United States and the process of resettlement in Mexico City. I have to read because I prepared a little paper, so sorry if it's pretty boring, but I have to read this paper. So I start. Following Goodman, the United States has deported nearly 75 million people since 1882, more than any other country in the world. And little attention has been paid to know what happens in the post-deportation lives. However, the experience of the poor people are starting to gain acknowledgement by scholars and are recognizing them as American diaspora. Are you hearing me well? Or it's a little problem? Are you hearing me well? Yeah. Yep.
It has some echo, but I don't know why.
Okay,
perhaps you can put the video off, Antonio. Probably, maybe we can hear the video.
Yeah, I turn it off.
Okay.
Okay, so I thought, as I told you, however, the experience of the poor people are starting to gain acknowledgement by scholars and are recognizing them as American diaspora. Caldwell asks, what happens when people are rejected and expelled by the country they consider their home? How do people identities is tied to a country that does not recognize them members? Let's see. The political environment that migrants face in North America is characterized by white nativism. I understand nativism as a mechanism to redraw the boundaries between them and us and justify the maintenance of privilege of a particular group. Nativism takes shape through a set of eclectic policies that redefine who is the real people of a determined political unit and who therefore must have more rights and power to decide the characteristics of the society in front of a group considered exogenous and unable to assimilate the essential characteristics of the original group. According to some scholars, the emergence of contemporary white nativism stemmed from the expansion of segregation among the native population from the recent economic crisis, the loss of confidence of the white nativists in the state, as well as the demographic transformation in the Western societies and its impact on the native population. It appears that nativism is not per se a constitutively anti-immigrant political position, but its construction is complex because it has a worldview that endowes a specific political community, the state. So the state must be defended according to a unique version of its history and a proud sense of belonging. Thus, under nativism, a nostalgic version of a nation and an attitude against the foreigner are combined from which anti-immigrant positions arise as the consequences and not the causes of how people's coexistence is defined and organized. Within this white nativist environment, I highlight the actions that organized return migrants developed to defend their rights in Mexico City. With this adjective, I focus on the organization called SEDES and the binational activists that they use to work with the poor people in Mexico. These organizations affirm that migrants face situations of discriminations, racism, and violations of human rights as the resettlement processes in Mexico have not been friendly, and there is often a negative sociocultural environment for return and the poor people. In the interview with the organization gave evidence relating to how this hostile context operates in Mexico City. They highlight 5 points. The first point to highlight is that those who return to their places of origin and those who for the first time migrate from where they born or have grown up do not want to go to Mexico. The second point is that returned people or the poor people are not always welcome by their families as they were money providers, and in their new situation, they can no longer contribute, so thus they are not contributing, so thus ended up being rejected. The third point is that the returned people have lost their standard of living because they have long ways to restart their lives. The fourth point is that after an exhausted life, product of living in an irregular legal situation, the returned people have feelings of failure. The last point that the interviews mention is that these returned people suffer racist and xenophobic actions, and they face mockery, abuse, and bullying from the locals who treat them with distance and rejection. Due to this complex situation in Mexico, SEDES argues that the deported people require solidarity, comprehension, and empowerment. This organization requires government to take concrete actions to resolve the crisis experienced with human mobility, and to do this, the organization proposed national, regional, and even mutual alliances. With the poor people, the organization promotes interculturality as they work with them because culture, races, beliefs are shared, mixed, and linked. As I told you before, this idea is how to think this new American diaspora as Caldwell has presented. To identify these deportees as the new American diaspora, I go back to Caldwell's question. What happens when people are rejected and expelled to the country they consider their home? According to Caldwell, approximately 1/3 of the people deported to Mexico consider the United States their home. President Obama, in many speeches about the Dreamers, mentioned that they are Americans in every way except for their papers. For Caldwell, the poor people with long-term ties to the United States are functional Americans by socialization. Regarding the empirical basis for this paper, these deportees see their situation as a living exile. Following these arguments, they leave Americans mean to challenge the traditional notion of what it means to be Americans and contest white hegemonic constructions of what it means to be American. Thus, the American diaspora compels to rethink about different ways of defining membership and even social citizenship in the United States, and highlight the contradictions of vanishing people who feel like they belong with territorial boundaries of the United States. For closing this presentation, in these papers identified the returned people have constructed dynamic and hybrid cultures for themselves as products of their life story defined by mobility. Hence, it is not accurate to identify the migrants moved linearly, namely, leaving one nation state and arriving in another. Returned people express that they will try to go back to the United States, particularly those who have American citizenship. For them, their lives on the move do not conclude with the resettlement in Mexico. With this in mind, organizations as SEDES promote and defend the other experiences and the abilities that migrants have acquired in their lives. For these organizations, the global and local institutions recognize those characteristics of migrants the deported people will be able to identify opportunities to restart their lives with dignity. So thanks, that is my little presentation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Professor Alejo.